Hi, welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 38. We are doing, what do we want to call this? Sleepy Summer Jams is kind of what I called it. I don't know.
Drifting to hypnagogic?
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
But drifting is maybe not chill if you're doing the car drifting.
Okay, yeah. That's open to interpretation, like hypnagogic as a genre. Yeah.
So welcome. Little housekeeping. I think worth mentioning that our bonus episode for July on our Patreon, Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com, talked about vaporwave and cinema, which is like a really nice little chat about what it means for something to be like vaporwave, I guess, in not like in an absolute sense, but like what does it mean to us to say something is a vaporwave? I had a really great chat, so I'm excited for our August episode, which will be kind of the same, but we're doing video games or broadly just kind of like active media. The previous one is really about passive media, stuff you watch, and this is about stuff you interact with.
I think it's going to be real interesting because not just games that are active media that inspired vaporwave, but active media that is inspired by vaporwave. Because there's a lot of new stuff in the last couple of years that is clearly influenced by vaporwave.
Yeah, for sure. But today we're back to hypnagogic, and as I said, Sleepy Summer Jams. I sort of just picked it on a fluke last week because we've been doing this process of sort of revisiting genres that we talked about at the beginning of the show and just seeing, instead of, here's like a classic album in the genre, what is it doing now? And it's interesting because once again, I think we've picked two appropriate but very different albums before we get into them, but I don't really have much of a preamble. I really liked researching and doing listening for this episode because I think I like hypnagogic or that sort of chill stuff, at least now, more than I've maybe let on in the past. I don't know if that's just mood or season or whatever, but like, I just really like being asleep. It's kind of what I realized. I love being asleep. I love falling asleep. So music that kind of puts me in that headspace, I associate very strongly with like comfort and tranquility. And it's been a peaceful episode to research. Did you have any sort of like thought process going into this, or are you just also just looking around?
One of the things that sort of occurred to me is, hypnagogic, it's not the most popular subgenre, I guess I should say, of vaporwave. It's not like future funk or vapor trap or mallsoft even. There's still artists who label themselves as hypnagogic and make hypnagogic music, but it's not the subgenre that people sort of immediately think of. I think maybe they think of A Bright New Day from 2014, but that would be about it. And some people call that like classic vaporwave or something like that. So like, it's kind of like a nebulous term or subgenre. And I think the differences between these two albums kind of shows that it's just really open to interpretation, even more so than other vaporwave subgenres. Cause like mallsoft, that's a subgenre you could tell if an album is in it or is not mallsoft, like within a minute. But like hypnagogic, you'd have to think more about it. It's more kind of like that space between being awake and asleep. It's more ambiguous. It's more otherworldly in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because not to like essentialize genres too much, of course, but there is like a production goal in mallsoft of like creating a sense of space and whatnot. And that is that's a little less ambiguous than what it means to be like, here's like chill, sleepy music. Because that could be something different for everybody. Again, I don't know. We don't have to get into it on air, but I've been thinking about this kind of like be my last like episode of like really obsessing over like what genre something is.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. It's just, especially with hypnagogic, because it's so less defined than the other subgenres. I think every other subgenre has a pretty strong identity to it by now, but like hypnagogic is a little like, where does the line between that and like ambient vaporwave or classic or experimental or something like that, or even like broken transmissions to a degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of my thought. That was sort of like going into it. I was like, man, hypnagogic's, even by vaporwave standards, it's kind of a weird subgenre. Neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So. It's like it's such an interesting little nebulous idea of what you're trying to do with your music. And I think both albums today, for me, I guess classify. I don't know if that means anything.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of shows also like that there's some variety within the subgenre, that both of these albums would fit in this term, but they're still pretty different in a lot of ways. So in fact, very different, I think.
Yeah, really, really different. So probably to the point where like, I think we should just probably start talking about them.
Yeah.
That slushy little vocal sample there is from track 2, White Key, Black Key of the album Piano Monologue by Desert Sand Feels Warm at Night. This is a recent album, just came out a few weeks ago as of recording. And the artist is one that we've talked about before. Their album Everlasting Summer came up on our Best of 2020 episode. It was like one of our, did we both pick it as a standout album? I know I
think
did.
So. I did. Yeah, I did too.
It was really good. And a lot of their stuff is really, really good. So they're interesting because they're fairly comparatively new. I think they've only been really releasing music since 2018, but they've done like a fair amount of interviews and stuff. So there's actually a bit more known about them than maybe even some older like vaporwave artists. But I don't really want to get into it too much. You know, like I'm not so interested in like what's the real name or the real person behind a producer or like an album project. I mean, we can talk about it if you want. If you at home are interested, I'm going to link 3 really good interviews that they did over the past 2 years. So if you're curious about their process or who they are, I think that's the place to go. But yeah, it's the rare vaporwave artist where we know their real name. You know,
yeah.
But their interviews are great. Seems like a really cool person. I think not necessarily because they've done the interviews, but I think they sort of like kind of being a little enigmatic behind the name. And I sort of just respect that. So yeah. I'm going to kind of gloss over that. But I'm going to talk about their music, of course, because I've been listening to a lot of it since that Best of 2020 episode. And it's just this really cool blend of slushy vaporwave, like we just played, like those distorted vocals and like weird samples, or I don't even know. I think they're samples.
No, I don't think the interviews I also found and read, and Desert Sand specifically said that they don't use samples, that it's all original material. So
yeah, that's true. I was thinking of that for all of the music. Maybe not vocals, but yeah, you're right. I guess that like literally no, like it's all basically no samples. Because that melody sounds so familiar in that vocal sample I just played.
I mean, like not sampled directly, but maybe like clearly influenced by certain pop. And like, it's interesting to make original material sound like it's plunderphonics. Like when I first listened to it before I read the interview, I was like, oh man, yeah, plunderphonics, baby. Pitch shift vocals. Hell yeah. Like, but no. So that's a real interesting technique of dealing with copyright and content ID systems, is just make it original, just make it sound kind of like it can make people think about it or guess it. So, well,
YouTube is really good at this. So if it comes back and yells at us for this episode, I'm going to come to you, Ross. I'm like, it is a song, but no, either way, original or sampled, it's great. I love it. So when I saw they had a new album and we were doing like hypnagogic chill stuff, it just basically had to be my pick because along with, Aphex Twin and Brian Eno, this has really slipped into my, like, I call it the phase of the day where I lay in bed and stare at the ceiling until I fall asleep. Oh. No, not like that. I just mean like it's a time of like listening to a very specific kind of music, and they're very good at making that kind of music for me.
Sure.
I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah. This music actually reminded me quite a bit of the music from Twin Peaks, the show, or at least certain elements of it, certain parts. And I think there's this sort of ethereal nature to it that kind of gives not just sleepy, but kind of like, I guess a key element of hypnagogic is this kind of evoking an otherworldly sort of presence. It's something is heightened, or you're not just in a normal place. It's a little weird. Well, not weird, but like, I don't know, spiritual maybe, but maybe that's a little pretentious. I don't know.
I mean, don't worry about being pretentious. I was like, translating all the track titles and being like, oh, this track's called glissando track 3, which is like a musical technique. So like a piano player flourishes by like dragging their fingers across the keys to like sweep up from one note to another. Mm-hmm. That's a glissando. Or like a very famous but normie example is the beginning of like Rhapsody in Blue, where the clarinet like does the little trill between the two notes and then sweeps up into the melody. That's a glissando.
Okay.
But there's not actually one that's like obvious in the song, or like that's not really like part of that track. So I was like, oh, is it like about a smooth transition? Like, just getting real deep into it, like probably too much so.
Yeah.
But I think it probably defines the characteristic of this album, which is, I think ethereal is a good word that you used, cosmic type stuff, like really smooth synth against piano. Because the album is called Piano Monologue, as I said. And I think it sticks to that. There's a lot of like really nice piano work. It's interesting because like the album's bookended by like nature samples.
Yeah.
Because both the end of the last track and the beginning of the first track have field recording, naturey, just birds chirping and like
I love that part.
Babbling brook type stuff. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And it fits with the album, which is like it's like 3D art of a piano by a babbling brook, like in the sunlight. But like I was really hooked immediately because like this like gentle vocalization comes in, and I love that little like hummy singing that they do. It reminds me a lot of I'm just going to shout out a pianist, even though they're not really related to what we're talking about, is Tigran Hamasayan, who is an Armenian like jazz pianist, but he does like Armenian folk and metal jazz. But he does that kind of like singing over like he plays a very different kind of piano part than what's on this album. But he does that like gentle singing over stuff, and I love that.
Yeah. Just you mentioned the album cover, and I just do want to shout out Desert Sands sticking with the original sort of vaporwave aesthetic by making that Bryce 3D looking cover that looks straight out of like a 1998 pirated copy of that software. Like it is like you could get, photorealistic forests now and like something, at 4K, just brilliant resolution. But no, it looks artificial and digital. But yeah, I appreciate that they're sticking to what vaporwave is about.
And I want to shout out that the artwork on there is credited to Xsha, who is an artist. I'll link their stuff in the show notes, but they do music production and cover artwork and that type of stuff. And it's all really cool.
Yeah.
So shouts to the artist that they were brought in to do that, because their stuff's awesome.
Yeah. I guess there's this kind of perception that making ambient music is really easy because there's a lot of very prolific, well, not a lot, but there are ambient artists who can just, well, I mean, how many albums has Desert Sand done in like 3 years? Like, but this is more complex and more interesting than a lot of ambient albums that I've listened to because of this, like, again, the piano music, I guess, the element of it, this sort of contrast between the synth and the piano is really engaging, but not like overwhelming. Yeah, I think this is like a nice place for ambient music to be not like, again, I've mentioned this before, but like drone style ambient music just gets so, I mean, there's a degree of, even for an ambient fan like me, too much monotony in the music. And yet there's music that says it's ambient, but is so active. I see that a lot in like a movie soundtrack kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this fits like it's the album that was just right.
And, they have been producing a lot of music. I think the last album release was just in May. But I just feel like it's an artist who's really figured out exactly what they want to make and is just really good at making that and making it really well. So just to give you a little bit more example, I want to play another sample from track 6, which is Piano Hammer That Strikes My Heart. So I picked this just because I really love the synth part that comes in there. It's like just so chill in a way that like some of the chill wave type stuff that we've done doesn't. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why it sits differently with me, but like it just does. And that type of stuff. I just really like listening to this whole album.
Well, a lot of lo-fi music is like, I think, again, a little on that too active side. Like the beat is a little too fast. It's just even the beats that are like, oh, beats to sleep by or to relax by. Like it's like, I think it literally just comes down to the beat being too fast a lot of times. Like
I think when you like really want to relax.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. You need that soundscape. You need that soundscape to just let you drift off.
And that's one thing that this album is really good at. And that, you know, the tracks are nice and long.
Yeah.
Which is like really important for this type of stuff for me. So the first track I sampled is almost 13 minutes long. That's, you know, a lot of these are over 6. You know, some are shorter, like 3 or whatever. But there's the tracks I really like the most are these just long ones where you can just really sink into them and they just go. And they just have like the other long track. I won't play a sample from it. This is track 7. I'm falling asleep. And there's just like all this texture and this development. And even though, you know, you could be reductionist and say like, yeah, every track is kind of like this dreamy synth and then the piano over it. Like, I just don't think that's fair. Like, it's just so varied and engaging, and then like still managed to go places because even though both samples I picked have some of these processed vocals on them, that's not the norm. You know, there's plenty of tracks that don't have that at all. There are some that have a very different vibe. So like track 8. So after you have this long, like 9-minute chill, I'm falling asleep track, there's like actually this kind of like dark chord out of nowhere, like this transition chord. And like, I was like, oh, are we going to have like a random dark song? Are we doing something different? And it doesn't. It just kind of rings out. And then like this really cosmic, like really, really ethereal synth comes up. And I lied. I'm actually going to put a little bit of it here. So stuff like that is just really, man, I like it. Like, I think this album, I don't really think of us as doing reviews, but I will say that I really liked it. And I think this is going to be in my pre-bed falling asleep rotation for probably for a long time.
Nice. So yeah, if you need that kind of music, definitely check it out. I mean, it's just peaceful. It's just relaxing. I mean, their entire discography seems to be pretty consistent. I haven't listened to all of their work, but all that I've heard has been good so far. It's worth checking out. But let's continue our journey through the realm of hypnagogic into our second album. So that was part of Warm Deathbed from the album Spirit Realm by Mac Bandit, which is a hypnagogic album, although it clearly sounds a little different, just a tiny bit different than Piano Monologue. This album is a very, actually a pretty big contrast from the previous album because it's a lot shorter. It's a lot more active than Desert Sands. And there are collaborators on this album that I've actually heard of some of them before. Special guests, Quattro, Matro, Otto, and Cocaine Jesus, and Morph. So there's just a lot.
It's a collaborative effort.
Yeah, it is.
Beautiful.
Cocaine Jesus, I've heard. Cocaine Jesus has been on some of those electronica shows that George Clanton has put on and has put out their own albums. this is clearly an album heavily influenced by video game music, and in particular, like Japanese games in the levels where you visit some kind of spirit realm or some sort of otherworldly place, going through the fog, and you're not sure where you are. It's to evoke mystery and, again, the etherealness, the otherworldliness of it, which, again, puts it squarely in hypnagogic, I think. But then we got some sick beats, yo.
Yeah, I was really surprised by the amount of, like, I hesitate to say like trap, but like trap-ish drums.
Vapor trap, yeah, for sure.
A little bit. And by that, I largely mean like those really staccatoed hi-hats that are kind of like bursty, like little groups of, 16ths or whatever, and more syncopated like kick work and stuff. Like there's like some parts of this I was like, is this like a hypnagogic beat tape? Because that kind of rules.
Yeah. I'll go with that. Yeah.
It's like you said, like spirit realmy synths, but also like someone's jamming back there.
There is also a lot of plunderphonics in this album. There's a lot of sampled material. And when I first listened to this album, it was late at night and I just had it on. So I heard the samples, but it didn't really click to me until you pointed it out. And I can't believe I missed it.
Yeah. When you were like, there's Star Wars samples. Like, what are you talking? I was like, it's not even edited. It's just a conversation between Han and Leia.
Track 2. Whoops, which we will not be putting in there because of
the mouse will come for us.
Yeah. There's also Blank Banshee in like track 3. And several other artists are used. So like I like that, especially I like using Blank Banshee in this album, like a vapor trap artist being sampled in in a hypnagogic album. Most of the tracks are very short. There is kind of a progression, I think, from the beginning of the album to be more active and faster paced. And then it sort of calms down, sort of slows down by the second half. And especially like track 7, Shift, there's these weird, like sort of clicking, gear clacking sounds and just these waves of sound coming in and out. And I quite like that.
I like that one too, because it had like the pulsing. I called it like the pulsing.
Yeah, it's going in waves, but yeah.
And like lasers. There's like pew, pew, pew lasers. It's fucking awesome. I was like, what is happening?
I think the standout track is the longest one, which is, to me, track 8, Friends from Your Past, featuring Cocaine Jesus. It starts with this kind of like heartbeat and then goes into this sort of calming synth beat. But then there's this lower, darker synth that sort of builds up and begins to overtake the calming layer. And then it almost becomes entirely drone. And then it just cuts out, but the calm layer is still there. So let's just play a little of it. That was really well constructed. It's so different from the rest of the album, and I really like that.
I want to emphasize one point you made, that the kind of the journey of the album, because like the first half is, as you said, these shorter little beat traps, but like it really mellows out. So there's like track 6, which is Lullaby, which is like the appropriate transition point. Where the back half of this album, I really liked. I like the first half too, but I think in terms of personal preference, just these growing into these slightly longer tracks that are just so smooth, like such smooth synth. Track 9, like was really stand out in this regard.
Oh yeah, you got those crows
for me. Spirit Essence, that really stood out in terms of like, wow, we've really transitioned moods here, and I really like that. As long as it does it well, like this album does, I really like that sort of journey across moods through an album, that the sort of storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the key term. The notes for the album, they're talking about, this is the spirit realm, the worlds that we cannot see but feel. So It's a quiet place.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would have been real interested to find out the conversation between all of these artists as they try to figure this out, but it works. And I think this is the kind of album I would definitely, if I was going to make a hypnagogic or even a vapor trap mix, any kind of vaporwave mix, I would throw in at least a couple tracks from here, because there are a lot of bangers in this one, but this is not music to fall asleep to.
Not in the same way, no, but it's still really, especially the back half again, I thought was really relaxing. And also extra shout outs again to maybe I'm just easy to please, but these album covers are amazing.
Oh yeah.
And I love the album cover for this one too.
Yeah, this is like a painted monster in like a watercolor.
Like pastel watercolor.
And the monster's giant and he's peeking over a mountain.
These big blue star eyes. Just like, hey, what's going on over here? It's beautiful. I just really like the colors.
It's kind of like a weird Pokemon. Like, yeah.
Well,
a big Pokemon.
I was more just thinking of like, I just really like the purples and pinks and blues and everything.
It's evocative. And it's, again, it's trying to set you in that state of mind of meditation. It's contemplative, I guess I would call it. So again, which links both of these albums together. By the way, the reason I chose this album, I was looking on the Hypnagogic tag on Bandcamp, and there was one album that caught my eye because I had listened to it before, Towers by Towers.
Okay.
But Pad Chennington did a whole review on this album. But at the beginning of the video, he talks about how their record label had other artists, including Mac Bandit, who did Spirit Realm, and had this album cover art. I was like, that album looks neat. I'm gonna check that out. And it was also on the Hypnagogic tag. So nothing against Towers. It's an interesting album, but like Pat Chennington's already covered it. They've got all the publicity they need.
Yeah, what are we going to do other than say it's good? But yeah, so we've had good luck. They're on the Geometric Lullaby label. We've always had really good luck with them. They're really quality. So it's, like Catcore and Winter Quilt. R23X is on there. I got the Groceries vinyls through them, which, man, I'm so excited for. It's like still another 2 months out. Sorry, getting sidetracked, but man, I'm excited for those vinyls. But yes, I think that's interesting. So we sort of, both by targeted chance, just came across two really good albums.
Well, I think the Hypnagogic tag kind of, it's not going to attract artists who are like bandwagoning or just like trying to, future funk's popular, I'll make some future funk, It's like, this is for people who just like have a vision and they don't really give a shit how popular it's going to be. No one's going to know my real name, and maybe 100 people will download this album, or maybe 1,000. I don't know.
I hope it's thousands. I hope it's tens of thousands.
Sure, but like they're clearly not motivated by trying to be the most popular. They have visions, perhaps of the other realm.
Perhaps. So thanks so much for listening to our little ramblings about Hypnagogic and Summer Jams. I think we covered two, as we said, very different albums that I definitely reiterate that you should go out and support and grab. But next episode, very different vibes. Too Mellow, who I almost said is famous for, but that's not true at all, who was nice enough to do our intro and outro music, certainly not famous for that, has an album coming out, Sounds of Tokyo to Future, a Jet Set Radio inspired album. The single Rave Shit came out shortly before recording this, which is awesome. It's absolute banger. I love it. There's like the saxophone and stuff on it's awesome. So that's coming out just in time for us to like listen to it and do kind of a quick review. But I'm really excited. I'm personally really hyped because I love that sort of, that's like my favorite future funkish type stuff is that Jet Set Radio soundtrack stuff.
Yeah.
I love that music.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really excited to listen to all of his
stuff. Cannot wait for Bomb Rush Cyberfunk to come out. That's next year. So until then, we have Too Mellow as, I guess, the methadone to get us through the next few months until Bomb Rush fills the void. So, yeah, I'm quite hyped to listen to it as well. Rave Shit was good. This is actually a follow-up of Too Mellow's previous album, Memories of Tokyo Toe, which is also Jet Set Radio themed, and also something you should listen to. But that's already out. That came out 3 years ago. So
yep. Wow, it has been 3 years. That's wild. Yeah, that album rules. Go check it out. Go pre-order this next one. And in the meantime, that being said, if you want to talk to us, we can find us on Twitter. We're at Nightclerk Radio on Twitter for the podcast. I am at Burke McBurkinson. Ross is at Ross Payton. You can also find us pretty much anywhere. I think you can type in Nightclerk Radio almost anywhere and we'll come up. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, websites, Apple Podcasts where you should rate and review us. As I always say, wherever you do choose to interact with us, if there's a thing you can tell the algorithm that you like what we do, please click it. And if you really want to get in on the community, you should check out our Patreon at Nightclerk Radio at patreon.com. We do a bonus episode every month. We have a Discord community where Ross posts links he's very proud of. And
we talk about stuff.
We have nice conversations with a varied group of cool people about all kinds of stuff related to Vaporwave and all the music we talk on here. So we'd love to have you join the community. So thanks again for listening, and hopefully you find some nice music to fall asleep to, because we have.